The world of business is more complex than ever. The world of human resources and compensation is also getting more complex. Welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast, your direct source for the latest trends from experts inside and outside the world of human resources. Listen as we explore the impact that compensation strategy, data, and people analytics can have on your organization. This podcast is sponsored by Salary.com, your source for data, technology, and consulting for compensation and beyond. Now, here are your hosts, David Turetsky and Dwight Brown.
Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky, and as you can tell, I've had lots of Diet Coke already today. And as always, we have my friend, my colleague from Salary.com, Dwight Brown. Dwight Brown, how are you?
I am great. I think I need as much caffeine as you have had.
Well, it's also
I'm
sugar,
not quite
too.
at that energy level right now.
I am powered today by the Coca-Cola products. So
this is what I just drank. So it's a Dr. Pepper zero sugar. So
zero sugar.
And I have that too.
Oh,
Dr.
my God. Look at you guys.
You hear from our guest, Ron Hetrick. Ron, how are you?
I'm great. I'm also semi-wired on zero sugar Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, Dr. Pepper has become part of my bloodstream now. So I usually have at least one or two 12-packs in the garage and one at least in the refrigerator. So
Got the IV bag hanging main line in it.
I would love to do that. If there's an IV, I'm going to find it. And this segment of the podcast is brought to you by Dr. Pepper Zero Sugar.
We
Not
really are
officially,
going to
of
make some
course.
sales for them. I want a residual.
Yeah, I would,
Right,
that would be great. Hey,
David, we're not
HR
supposed to
Data
sell
Labs
on the podcast.
we heard on your podcast that you were saying that we sponsor you. We don't. So please cease and desist.
Yeah, exactly.
So all of that to introduce our new friend, Ron Hetrick. Ron, how are you?
I am doing great. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We're 2 good working days into the new year. So
Is that all?
to get a feel for what it's going to be like, right?
It feels like a lot
Man,
more.
it feels like it's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we've actually been working since, at least, Dwight, last Thursday? So we've had at least 4 official days.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
more.
I ended up going to the zoo on Friday last week.
That's
good-
awesome.
Oh,
Which
Yeah.
zoo?
Jacksonville's zoo. It's like they have a good zoo down here. Weather was too great to re-engage that soon, but now it's gotten cold, so you might as well work, right?
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, and the animals have all gone in their shelters as well, so.
Probably now they are. They were still out a bit, but they were all making sure they were in the sun.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, Ron, now that we know that you're in Jacksonville, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
So I'm a senior labor economist at Lightcast. I have been a labor economist since 1992, so
Wow.
33 years of doing this. It's really been the thing. I've spent a lot of time kind of studying industries. Really what's been the obsession over the past 4 or 5 years has been demographics as it relates to labor force. So the demographic drought, I was lead author on 21. Who's
Right.
going to do the work, which I always say I kind of toured on it, like was an album for a couple of years, keynoting on that. And then A Rising Storm, which came out a couple months ago. All of these pieces were really uplifting, as you can imagine.
Oh, sure.
We'll be talking about that today. But yeah, there was a time about a year or two ago where I thought, how can I keep doing this? Like, how can I keep bringing this great message of chronic labor shortages to people? But
Right.
I think I've kind of rounded the corner on it, and I realized that it really is about just making sure people understand things, and then you can kind of prepare for the storm.
And so, by the way, we're going to have links to the Rising Storm report and the audio recording in the show notes. So for those of you who want to catch up to what Ron's talking about, you will have the ability to do that after you listen to the podcast. Or if you want to stop now, go to the show notes, listen to that, and then come back. You'll be much more, I guess, aware, right?
Yeah, there's a lot there. But I think we talked to a reporter one time who I loved his statement. He goes, you could pick any 10 pages in Rising Storm and be blown away.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the greatest compliment. It's when you write something, it's like making a movie, right? Like the point of editing is to make sure that anything that doesn't move the plot along kind of goes to the side. And we worked really hard on making sure that Storm was a tight message where every paragraph would be something that could potentially blow your mind. And
Right.
I was proud of the way that turned out.
That's awesome. And before we get on to our topic, let's ask the one question we love asking each of our guests, which is, what's one fun thing that no one knows about Ron?
The hardest part about a question like this is that I'm an incredible extrovert. So everybody seems to know everything about me, from the guitars and my background to the fact that I have way too many hobbies. But I think the one thing, unless you were my wife, you would not know about me is that I am a weird kind of like, I will eat any kind of food, but I do food as cycles. So I can't have like Indian twice in the same week, or sushi, twice in a week or something like that. Everything has to have its slot, so I'm going to eat, something, and it'll be like 2 weeks before I have it again. So it makes for real fun times when I've had something and then a couple will be like, we want to go out, and they'll say, we want to go to this restaurant. I'm like, wow. I kind of had that like 2 days ago. So I'm kind of
like,
for that
what's
right
wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, Ron, I have something similar, but I'm kosher. So I always have the excuse of I can't go there.
There you go.
Yeah.
I can go anywhere. It's just a matter of I don't want to.
Right.
Just don't want to. Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, that's fascinating. And there's probably some psychology behind that. Maybe even some body chemistry behind that too.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah. But we're not going to go there any further because that will take the place of our topic for today.
All right.
And maybe,
although it would be a fun topic to talk about. It really
would. Yeah, actually, I'd love to talk to you about the psychology of that. But let's have that as a separate topic for another podcast.
Sounds good.
What we're going to talk about today is about the demographics of our economy and how the replacement of the baby boomers with younger generations, and how do we fix the shortages in the key sectors?
Yeah.
And so what we'll do is we'll talk about how this is really a big shift for our economy. So, Ron, one of the graphics that stood out in your report is that from 2024 to 2032, U.S. population growth outpaces the labor force growth by 4-1.
Yeah.
What's an overview of how we're seeing these labor shortages show up in the economy?
Have you ever wondered what really makes a generation tick? Who gets to pick the name? And why the slang keeps changing? Don't worry, I can help. My name's Dr. Megan Grace. On #GenZ, I share the voices and experiences of Generation Z, how they're different from other generations, what moves them, and why they do what they do. In each episode, we go beyond the buzzwords and the stereotypes to dive into real conversations and the insights that matter to making intergenerational collaboration a reality. You can catch #GenZ on the Work to Find podcast network and wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, it's funny, like people talked about baby boomers for forever. And I think what we were trying to say in Storm is, okay, that's nice. And we can talk about how populations change, but there's a really kind of a damaging effect of when a huge group of people all get old at the same time, and you didn't really have a lot of children to kind of replace them. And what happens, and what we talk about in that report, is people retire, and they're able to retire earlier now than ever because the money accumulated is unlike anything we've ever seen in human history.
Right.
And so when you retire with all this money, you become a consumer, and you also become a consumer of a lot of things. But when you are retired, you used to produce and consume. Now you are just consuming. And you'd start to wonder, well, then who's doing the producing for the consumers? And just the very statement, of which we're going to be talking about more and more on this call, is what does producing mean? What is it that people consume that keeps them alive, that keeps an economy going? And I think that was the point we really wanted to dive into in Storm.
Well, so I'm older. I'm, I guess, a Generation X.
Yes, probably. I'm guessing by looking at you.
Yeah, thanks. And and one of the things that I worry about is I'm not going to be retiring for many, many years. Probably not until my kids all graduate from college, which is at least another, probably another, maybe even 10 years, 8 years, probably. But I guess the question is that I think a lot of other people will find it difficult to be retiring, whether it's because of the economy shifts in the last few, over the last decade or two, and then the lack of good savings. So how does that affect it as well?
Yeah, what's interesting and what we try to talk about in Storm is this is actually a misconception that people have. Number one, there was a belief for many years, you're taking the physical parts of these jobs away. A lot of the physical jobs are going away, so people can work longer, because these are professional jobs, and why wouldn't they work longer? There was also this concept of we're healthier than we ever been. We actually have a generations coming up now not smoking all the time. Right. So, people would be healthier and they'd be able to work longer. But what we're seeing is retirement ages keep moving down. And the reason that is while people will talk about, kind of things in the economy and all these kind of things, the reality is the accumulation of savings is very unique for boomers. This is the first generation in history where both spouses worked over a course of a career and most likely worked professional jobs. So household wealth accumulation is unprecedented. And these are people, boomers, who would have bought their homes, 20, 30 years ago.
Sure. And
if they're selling homes now, the equity they've built up has allowed them enormous capabilities. So a couple of years ago, inflation starts to take off. And there were a lot of people that had retired. I don't want to say early because the data doesn't support that. The data just basically said that a lot of people who were otherwise going to stay in the labor force decided to go ahead and retire. And these people were well into their 60s, even into their 70s. So it wasn't necessarily people 55. So what we found out was during that time that inflation was taking off, labor force participation amongst people 55 and older never got better. In fact, it trended up a little bit and actually starting to go back down again. And so I think that one thing we have to, I know it's a popular narrative, but I think the data clearly shows that people are able to retire and they absolutely are retiring. And we do really have to appreciate the amount of wealth these people generated compared to their parents or grandparents is astounding. It's astoundingly different.
So when we look at it from a workforce perspective, that's one thing. But what also goes through my head is there any impact on, as people get older, there's going to be more utilization of healthcare and those sorts of things. Does that factor in one way or another, or is it just totally separate?
This is the most interesting thing. I think if we wanted to, Rising Storm could have been a novel. I mean, it was meant to be a research paper because, especially with attention spans like mine, it's hard to make it through a really, really long piece. And we really wanted to make sure that we honed in on this issue. But you start to think about this in totality. If you have a population base, our native-born population is largely retiring. If you go over the past 4 years, the native-born labor force is actually shrinking. All of our labor force growth has been through immigration. So if you think about that, well, who are people that take out of their paychecks to contribute to the stock market and drive that kind of growth so that we see consistent economic growth? Who is this consuming population? And we see the consuming population, aging. Well, the products that aging populations buy are very different than the products that young couples buy or people in their 20s and 30s buy. And so you have to look at it even beyond healthcare. You have to go into everything and start to think, what are the next opportunities? What's the economy really going to need? And obviously healthcare is the easy one because you go, well, they're all getting older and they're going to need more healthcare. But there's actually a lot of other service level occupations that these people are going to need as time goes on. And I think that unfortunately, this is where I end up getting the moniker of prophet of doom when I speak. I have to. When you talk about these things and you do the math absolutely does not add up. If you think about the fact that these people aren't dying, right? They're just they're living longer and they're consuming over these periods, this period of time. You're still going to need more and more producers because the population is still growing. It's just the way it's growing is not like we've ever seen. So
where you're going to need the producers is shifting with that.
Yeah. And I think in the paper, one of the things we mention is 9 out of the top 10 jobs in the U.S., most posted jobs don't need a college degree of any kind. And these are service level jobs, people who work in restaurants and, retail, people who sell things to you so that you can live. And labor is another one, a big part of it. And that is a huge part of this paper, is to bring this awareness of, we've told people for 3-4 decades that college is the only way. Well, they listened and they all went to college. Well, that's not, not to insult people. I have a college degree, but that's not what an economy needs to survive.
Right.
Economies are actually run by the people who kind of do the service level jobs, but those are very unattractive jobs. They're hard. And who's going to do the work? In an earlier article, we asked high school students, why don't you do these jobs? And they're like, well, they're hard. I'm outside. Right. I want to be at an office and everything. And these are very real. I haven't talked to a person yet. It's like, I just completely embrace wanting to put a roof on in the middle of the summer. I think that's awesome. And yet the roof is what you need.
Right.
But we used to, and this might be changing due to politics more than anything else, we used to turn to immigration for those roles to get filled.
We're not used to. That is the way we're filling them.
No question. But it is today. But there's this political and social upheaval of, well, you got to pay them more so that more Americans can do that work. And I'm being dramatic for a reason there.
Where the Americans don't want to do the work.
Americans don't want to get up on the damn roof.
The perception that people aren't doing the jobs because of pay is certainly not borne out in the skilled trades data. I mean, HVAC techs are making $120,000, $150,000. You see that consistently in a lot of skilled trades. It really does come down to they're tough jobs, and we're not in a position right now where people, are embracing that kind of work. And more, you're growing up in households where you didn't see your parents doing that kind of work. One thing I think we talked about in Storm, but the reason why the military can't hit their enrollment numbers every year now is because we have a record few number of kids growing up in homes where the parents were in the military. Right. Mm-hmm. And that is a huge driver of, people going into those particular things. And it's really hard if you've never been exposed to something like that to want to do it.
Well, in the 60s, it was also a social issue. People in the 60s and 70s either were conscientious objectors. I don't want to go to the military. Right. I'll face prison. I'll do whatever. Right. Or, and then in the 80s or 90s, it became much more patriotic. But then it still was, are you going to go to school or are you going to go to the military? Or are you going to take one of these skilled trades? And then in the 90s and 2000s, you're seeing many more second generation Americans going into the military and being able to fill out a lot more roles that we used to have before. Sure. Now they're coming back into a lot of those skilled trades. So, but still, you need the immigration cycle in this process, and especially with birthright, you need people who are second generation Americans or first generation Americans at least to do a lot of those roles that other people just won't.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate aspect. Is one of the things we didn't write about this so much in the paper, but it's something when I speak live that I talk about a lot, and that it's the concept of esteeming jobs. We tend to esteem certain jobs and look down on others, and it's almost subconscious that you do it. And an example that I give is, you'll go through an airport and you'll see people working at a food counter in the airport, and your initial thought is, I wonder what happened to them in life that they are working this food counter in this airport, when the reality is the job they're doing is probably way more valuable than the job you're flying to go do in that moment. And that is, it's hard if we say going forward that these are the positions that we're really going to be struggling to fill, number one, because we really don't have many young people to do them, and number two, because immigrants do a lot of them, and maybe there's an attitude shift about how immigrants will work in this country, then you get to this, well, if you don't change the esteem of these jobs in a second, you're going to be in a bigger and bigger hole. And the reality is we painted these jobs into this corner for 30, 40 years. There's no way you're going to reverse thinking the psychology of people in 5 years.
Yeah, it's steering the Titanic, truly.
That's exactly right.
Well, one of the fascinating things that I was able to get, because I worked at ADP and we paid 1 in 6 people, was that 2/3 of America is actually in those non-exempt jobs. They're doing those production jobs. And that's 2/3. So it's like if you're a white collar, I hate to use the word white collar worker, but if you're in those professional jobs, you have this elitist attitude of, well, they do that work and we do this work. And so it's actually not fair, because to your point before, they're getting shit done, pardon my French. We're not. We're making suppositions, theories, and stuff, and they're actually doing it.
I really want to say something after you just said that, because this is we wrote Demographic Drought, and I'm out speaking, and something just starts really eating at me. And that's kind of what caused the paper of who's going to do the work to be written. And that's where we interviewed 1,500 high school students. And we said, what are you going to do after you graduate? And now our sample was a little biased. So many of these people were going to go to college. But we asked some questions about, well, why is that? And the societal pressure was a big part of it, not only from, parents, but guidance counselors, their own friends. Hey, I'm going to this college. Well, I was going to do this skilled trade. Wow, I feel a little bit lesser now. So this need to do that. But all of these factors come in. And when we were writing that, where there was some debate when we were coming up with that paper about the title, and I was like, no, it's going to be called Who's Going to Do the Work? Because what I wanted to say in that paper, and what we really tried to drive home in Rising Storm is, okay, so not you. Okay, so not your children, right? Because you're like, well, I didn't do all this so you couldn't go to college.
Right.
So not your
Exactly.
children.
Right.
So who does the work? So, and that's in that paper, and of course in Storm, we're like, well, it's clear that what we're saying is it's not us and it's not our children. It'll be other people's children from other countries. So we're going to rely on them to do it. Well, what happens if that valve gets shut off? Then whose children are you going to want to serve you? Because ultimately it does come down to that, as we've always used the term, we're a service economy, but there's no one here to serve us, because we all just want to be served, and that's not how things work.
Do we see any of what I'll call the recycling effect? So I think of a lot of people I know who retire that then go back and get a job at Home Depot or Target. They're like, hey, I'm done with all the office stuff. I just want something where I can turn my mind off and just work. Do we see a lot of recycling effect, or is that kind of a trickle thing?
A lot is a big statement. We see it, but it's not to the degree I think a lot of people think it is. And one thing that is so important when you talk about this topic, so important, is to understand when these people re-engage, they are not re-engaging in a full-time capacity. I mean, it is literally like, I feel like being busy a day or two a week. And so they're not looking for your company's employee value proposition or long-term growth plan or to be wed to you. They're literally like, this is fun for a while. My health is kind of a problem. I'm feeling good right now, but I need something I can kind of engage and disengage from. And so one of the things that, we started talking about early on is luring older people back into the labor force is not a long-term solution. It's a Band-Aid, and it's the worst kind of Band-Aid because it masks a true strategy to getting towards the future.
Right.
And you saw this happen. And best example I can ever give of this was, if everybody remembers, way back when CSX laid off all their middle managers. I don't know if you remember this. And so they laid off all their middle managers. Well, then their managers all got old and went to retire, and there was no people behind them because they had laid them all off. So what they did is they would bring these people back, in a kind of like SOW arrangement, paying them 2 to 3 times what they were being paid, because they didn't think the long-term part of this out. They were looking for a short-term cost. At the time, there was such a war against middle managers in this country, and probably still is to a degree.
There is, yeah.
But there's a reason why you have people in middle managers, because you envision them eventually going to this level. And so when that level happens and you haven't had a plan for it, then you're likely going to spend way more than you would have spent. But that's not the way we do things.
Interesting.
Well, and the other key issue here is that starting rates aren't what starting rates used to be. And everybody complains when the minimum wage goes up. And the minimum wage is not a sustainable living wage.
Well, the minimum wage isn't even relevant in most areas anymore because we're $3-4 above the floors that they were setting. It was interesting that a lot of this minimum wage increases came in 21, 22, when the market itself was like $14, $15. I know 18.
Right.
It's 18 to 20. I mean, McDonald's is putting up signs for 16 in areas where the minimum wage was probably 11.
Right.
And so here's the thing about it. If you go into the future and you start to look at these things, because I get this question a lot, usually from the crowd after I get done speaking, and they'll say, well, don't you think that we'll fix some of these problems if those wages go up in things like, let's just say fast food? And I'm like, well, that could help, but you hate that. You do not want these people getting paid more. Right. And you see these people like, no, I don't. I'm like, no, you absolutely do.
Because their prices go up.
When that happened, the the closer you are to the product, the more your pay increases directly reflect in the product price. If I pay my IT people more money, that's probably never making it to product.
Right.
But my frontline store people get paid more, that goes in the product price. Therefore, when they get paid more, you get really angry. And then the Fed comes in and starts raising interest rates because they're trying to get inflation under control.
Right.
And you see how this thing works. And I think that that's just that a lot of people wish that it came out of the CEO's pocket, when they have to pay these people more and they're going to take it out of their pocket. I'm like, that is not how it works at all.
Right.
It goes straight to you.
But it is a very visible way, because now we're not talking about 20 or 30 times an average worker pay. We're talking about thousands of times.
Oh, it's crazy.
An average worker pay, because executive compensation has gone through the freaking roof, and it's really nowhere near. It's astronomical compared to when I was in exec comp back in the 1980s and 1990s, and we were talking about, what's a relative ratio? Well, now those ratios are just
forget it.
Absolutely freaking crazy.
Yeah.
Especially given stock prices and other metrics, other KPIs that can track what they should be.
Yeah.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking subscribe. This podcast is made possible by Salary.com. Now, back to the show.
Why don't we transition, though, a little bit? Because I know we're going to talk a little bit about some of these things that were certainly on my mind, I'm sure on Dwight's mind as well. Which industries are really being hit the hardest with labor shortages? I imagine you just mentioned one, which is not just fast food, but really restaurants in general, right?
Yeah. So what we do in the paper is we try to say, let's do this as a cat level. We all recognize, I live in Florida. We know hurricanes. So let's talk about this in terms of a cat. Well, how do you get...
You know better than we do, unfortunately.
So how do you get to a cat level? And the cat level is the easiest thing for us to kind of illustrate. And that is, there are 4 ways that work gets done. That's it. 4 ways. You can globalize, shift work out to the world. Mm-hmm. You can bring in immigrants, so immigrants can do your work. You can automate. You can try to use AI or robotics to do the work, or you have to hire from your local labor pool. So if I start removing options like a hospital, so a hospital can't globalize. I'm not going to send you to Belarus to get surgery.
You could, but that would probably kill them for faster than anything else.
But so let's take that off the table. AI and robotics, that has already been a pretty big non-starter. It's one of the things we talked about in Japan. They've already abandoned the robotics program in the hospitals because the nurses were fixing the robots more than they were working with patients. So we look at that and we go, okay, we've narrowed your options down to immigration and to hiring from your local labor pool. Well, there's an added level of complexity. So our 2 Cat 5s are construction and healthcare. Why? Because not only am I hiring from my local labor pool, but I'm asking something of them. Like in healthcare, registered nursing is by far the most requested job in this country. They need a very, very difficult, a top 5 most difficult to get degree in this country is registered nursing. I need those people. It's hard to get it. It's expensive. You have to have that skill level.
Yeah.
Only 4% of our college grads last year got a nursing degree. No one's really wanting to do that. By the way, you may have to clean up bottoms. All of those things that don't go with being an IT developer. Is what you're saying. Yeah, are in that job. So that makes these dials up the intensity a lot. Construction's the same way. Yes, I can have construction workers, but so much of construction is not in the labor. It's in the skilled trade that you have. Well, these are jobs that require you to have a certain level of physical dexterity, certainly a willingness to maybe work in, where are we building the most in this country? Well, in the southern states, it's very hot most of the time. So it starts to narrow down your pool. You no longer can employ that person who's 75 years old. And the younger people that you're trying to attract, we have less and less of them, and most of them are going to college, as we talk about in the paper. So that's really how we look at the Cat 5s. And then what's funny about this is we flip the whole world on its head. The Cat 1s, banking, insurance, IT, you can globalize.
Yep.
AI's coming into these jobs in a lot of places. They can use immigrants in various ways. These are some of the more sophisticated programs we have. Even if H-1B isn't big enough, it does create an avenue to employ people in other countries. Remote work. You can't remote work a hospital job.
Right.
But you can remote work IT, banking, insurance. So everything that was tough to fill, the STEM jobs that we used to say, or what we all have to go into, we're now saying, no. Remote and AI and all these things, in the next 5 years, those jobs will be some of the easiest to fill, relatively speaking, to some of these ones that we see, depending on a local labor force that just may not be there.
Right.
Yeah.
Try and hire an accountant. It's not too hard.
No.
Try and hire an electrician or a plumber. It's impossible.
I got an anecdote for you. I talked to a company that put a posting up for an accountant and a maintenance worker. It was a hospital. They had about 150 applications for the accountant by that night. And over the course of 2 weeks, they had one applicant for the maintenance worker. And that person was just what we call applying for the purpose of saying they were applying so they could collect unemployment.
Well, I'm really an accountant.
Dialing for dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but what's happening is, and I've seen this actually occur, is that people get ghosted so much and they get fed up that they start to think about switching careers.
Yeah.
And they start to settle. And their expectations about their compensation and their world have to completely change.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Or the markets change for them and with them. And so their compensation goals might get met because the market is so bad for those roles.
Correct.
And so I joke with my son a lot about becoming a plumber because he's like, I want to be a paleontologist. I'm like, no, you probably want to be a plumber. And it's not just because every time he bends over, his butt hangs out. It's because...
So there is more than one qualification for this.
There is.
Well, I actually have a friend whose son did graduate a 4-year college. I think he had a business degree, who is now training to be a plumber because he hired a plumber and saw how much they were making. So he decided to make a career switch. I think you're going to see more and more of that going forward. I think, one of the things that we talked about in Who's Going to Do the Work was when we interviewed these high school students and they talk about, or when you talk to Gen Z and now Gen Alpha, what is it you're looking for? Well, I want the job to have a sense of purpose. I want to feel like I'm accomplishing something.
I'm doing something.
I want to know when I go to bed at night that I've made a difference. I'm concerned about my career progression. Well, hey, congratulations. You just described skilled trades.
Right, exactly.
Right, exactly.
Getting heat in someone's house is definitely a skill that, has a good side to it.
You've just made people happier than anybody's ever going to make somebody happy.
Right.
Like I always say, the world doesn't need another app for your phone. If all technology stopped today, if it all stopped, if we didn't see another technological innovation from now until the end of time, we would be completely fine as a society.
Yep.
Now, if we somehow remove the people from our food supply, that could be a very, very real problem. And that's something we have to start to look at, in the next year or so.
One of the things that you've mentioned that it is a reality, especially post-COVID here, is further limitation of the workforce because people have gotten used to remote work and absolutely do not want to go into jobs that requires them to be somewhere besides their living room.
Right.
And
so we've done a study. We just got the data right before Christmas. So we worked with a partner company of ours, and we're getting ready to we're still exploring the full depths of how we want to put this data out, but I'll just tell you real quickly. In overall, remote roles doing the same thing got 100% more applicants than the non-remote jobs. So,
of course,
what this whole came about, and if my daughter ever hears this, she'll feel so happy that her father called her out. And my daughter actually does my profession as well. She asked me one day, she goes, I sit in an office with recruiters, and all day long I hear them, and this is mostly engineering, and they're making these calls. And as soon as they get to it's in person, the person's like, I'm not interested.
Right.
And she goes, I wonder how many people who say they're unemployed or are saying they're looking for a job are really only looking for remote work. And I've been begging the job boards to join us on our quest to show us, for the amount of profiles that they have on their job boards, how many of those profiles are only sitting there applying to remote jobs. And I think it could be a great service for all of us to know that.
It certainly would.
Yeah.
Well, it would certainly help designing and doing workforce planning, right?
Sure.
Designing roles and workforce planning. If you knew that the market, especially in the location that you're at and the market you're looking for, if you're not going to be able to hire people locally, then you may actually start thinking about more, not just nationally, but globally.
Yeah. And by the way, you can't afford a home.
Right.
I mean, home affordability is in the toilet. Right. That's no great lie. One of the things when I speak, and I'm speaking later this week in a location in the Carolinas, and one of the things I do when I study a location is I immediately go to home price and I look at how much it's gained in the past several years. And in this particular location was 38%. in the course of 2 years. And I think about the fact that salaries didn't go up 38% anywhere.
Nope.
Right.
So you have essentially priced your market for retirees or boomers who are selling their now grossly overvalued home so that they can move into these. Well, that's the exact not labor force that you are going to attract into your homes.
Right.
You do not have the inventory, and your inventory is not priced for service workers to move into. So what are they supposed to do? And that's, I've been challenging companies and locations to do more work to, instead of just saying, I offered you a job, the rest is your problem. It's like, no, it's your problem. If you want them there, you should be talking with the builders. You should be talking with the landlords of these places and saying, what options do we have for our people who are moving in at these salary ranges?
Well, I think it actually goes also back to your planning boards and your governments and your taxation and your and the taxation and legislators, because they're the ones who are setting up either incentives or disincentives for these things to happen. And so you're right. I mean, you can go to landlords, but landlords are only going to try and get as much as they possibly can.
Absolutely.
Right.
And the mortgage brokers and the mortgage companies and the banks, they're trying to get as much as they possibly can. So unless you go to the people who are legislating this stuff, it ain't going to change.
I would say one thing, and that is, and now it's funny, I live in St. Johns County, Florida, and it's actually on a slide that I use, and I'm like, I promise I didn't go out and look for my own county. I didn't even know we were doing it until I did a Google search. A housing developer down here did a development, but they set aside a certain number of these homes at a lower market price, but you had to be working as a healthcare worker or in one of these jobs that were deemed very necessary for the county.
Sure.
Because St. Johns County is a very overeducated county. 50% of our residents have at least a college degree, and
That's great.
National average like 34. So, those are things that are very intentional. And you're right, that is something that can be done. But I also would say that if I am a large company and I'm hiring a certain kind of worker, if I'm a hospital and I'm hiring nurses, I would think that there would be certain apartment people would be like, look, that's a safe bet for me. Yeah. Like, you're going to bring these people in. I know how much their mix. Like, I know they're going to meet their payments every single month. And I'm willing to trade off risk to give you a price that would attract people to do that. And I think it's just something that has to be explored.
Or some sort of benefit, for your employees, some sort of housing benefit that goes there. But again, that's more money, and it's going to hit the pricing, and part of that vicious cycle.
Yeah, I was going to say we have Section 8 housing here in Massachusetts, and that is that when you build a certain number of homes, you have to keep some as a certain proportion for lower income housing. And, that's just the law. And you can apply to not have it apply to you, but you have to really bend over backwards to have it be not applied to you.
Yeah.
But I love I also think it's location. If you're in an area that has a lot of healthcare organizations, that makes more sense. If you have no healthcare in your entire county, then that ain't going to work.
Right.
Or maybe it's a way of enticing that to happen.
Well, they're building a lot of hospitals here, and I think that they were looking at it going, okay, we can't staff the hospitals that we have, and we're going to build more.
Yeah.
So we got to create some kind of mechanism to get people into this labor force.
Well, it also, people want to live in areas where there are like people near them, probably.
That's right.
And so they can all commute to the same place, or they can share war stories.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
It is. Hey, are you listening to this and thinking to yourself, man, I wish I could talk to David about this? Well, you're in luck. We have a special offer for listeners of the HR Data Labs podcast. A free half-hour call with me about any of the topics we cover on the podcast or whatever is on your mind. Go to salary.com/HRDL consulting to schedule your free 30-minute call today. So the third question, Ron, which I'm dying to get to, is we talk a lot about AI in the world of HR. Is AI a potential solution for this challenge? And as I'm saying it, I'm like, how can it be? As we talked about, you can't replace people in lots of different work with AI. How can it help?
Yeah, I think one of the most incredible things about this paper, and you don't really know this until you're well into writing it, and you know there's certain things you want to go look at. You take some time, you finally get it, and then it all kind of comes together. What we kind of saved to the end of that paper was lessons from Japan. And that little piece, it's only 2 pages, 3 pages, is so powerful. And what you find out in Japan is we learned some things. And number one was people who are getting older, because in Japan, it's common to work till you're 80 years old. Well, what are the jobs that 80-year-olds are willing to do in Japan? What do they apply to? And so they looked at that and they were like, well, they were kind of light professional roles, office jobs and things like that. Well, we also know, as we talk about in the paper, that all of our labor force growth has been college grads. We actually have a pretty big gap, a big decline in non-college grads. Well, college grads are looking for these kind of light, early professional office jobs. And then we look at AI. And right now, all of the AI investments going to B2B, even though the B2C market was supposed to be the dominant part of where AI was coming in, to this point, if you look at private equity venture capital investments, they're almost exclusively, it's heavily leaning towards B2B, because those people can write the big checks to justify the investment that you put into the AI research in the first place. Well, those are also in office and professional. Like, you start to look and you go, a problem that we don't have is getting 3 solutions. Meanwhile, all of the problems that we do have no solutions. Older people will not do a lot of these manual labor jobs. These college graduates certainly are not going to be like, well, I just paid $50,000 for my degree. I'm not going to, go be a laborer. Sure. And then lastly, there's just no money for AI to go after. So one of the things we talk about is, when you talk about a franchise restaurant, you're talking about people who have their own P&L. They're not investing in robotics and such, because that's a very expensive transformation. And if the machine breaks, you still need people. Well, and not to insult them, but McDonald's can't keep an ice cream machine running. So how are you supposed to keep a robot doing most of your labor? So we just look at it and say the environments aren't good for these kind of things. There's not a big check to be written. The checks would be very small. And for the amount of money that's being invested in AI, the return's not there. And when will they start? Well, there was some speculation that maybe in 2026, 27, you start to see the B2C. But I challenge that. If the checks don't come in really big from B2B, then I don't imagine they're going to be too anxious to go spend a lot of additional money investigating how they're going to make money in that B2C market.
There were a lot of investments in Japan made in humanoid artificial intelligence and robots.
Yeah.
Never really became popular in the consumer environment.
No. And they love to show these things jumping on boxes. Yeah, right. And then you see the cutouts that they didn't show, which is them falling, trying to go up a single stair. And you're like, would you trust that robot to pick your mother up in a nursing home and move her? And the profound answer is absolutely not, because if it drops one person, you're going to get sued through the floor.
Or holding a baby for even a second.
Even a second.
And putting too much pressure on the baby and crushing the baby.
Yeah, you can let it assemble a car in a factory.
Yeah.
But the second it touches a human being, whoa. I mean, we use robots to assist surgeons, but the surgeon's right there, guiding the robot. Yeah. They're using the robot as an extension of their own hand. The robots, they didn't walk in the room and type something on the robot and then leave and go to lunch.
Stand aside, doctor. I've got this.
Dr. Robot.
It's kind of like down here. We have all the Waymo self-driving cars that are a surrogate for taxis, and you see all over the internet the videos of when the self-driving software goes haywire. And same concept as the humanoids. A couple lawsuits
away from failure.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great idea, but,
Well, the reason why I was going there, Dwight, was because to have somebody serve a McDonald's hamburger, there are so many human steps in getting the hamburger.
Right.
It's crazy.
From the fryer to the person.
Right.
And you can automate it with the conveyor belts. You can we've been using conveyor belts forever.
Yeah.
But it still needs to have somebody hand that bag to the person. I mean, you could do what we used to have in New York, which is the automats. But it still took a person to put it into those little doorways so you can open the door and get your food. So until all of that happens, people are necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, let's close the door on that conversation with people.
Well, and that's the whole point of the paper is, at the end of demographic drought, one of the things we said was what we need to change the most is our attitude and the way that we look at I need service and I want this now. And this person messed up and they got my order wrong. And why aren't they sitting me down? All this kind of self-entitlement was basically born out of a surplus of labor where you could be spoiled. Well, now you're not going to have a surplus of labor. So you're going to have to put up with some things. And it's best to start to adjust the attitude now and treat everybody with respect than just be a jerk. We don't need more jerks.
Well, I wonder if that attitude still plays at home. Like, are you going to yell at your spouse? Are you going to yell at your kids? Are you going to yell at yourself for that same crap that would happen in a restaurant? Not a freaking chance.
That's right.
No way.
Why aren't you serving me?
Right, exactly.
Stop being a baby. Be out of the house right there.
Yeah, stop being a baby, shut up, and take your food when it comes. Because all of us, and I think one of the comedians said that everybody should be forced. Just like in Israel, you're forced to be part of the military. Every American should be forced to take a job. And Jillian, you can quote me on this. Every American has to be forced to be in either a server job or a bus person job, so that they have to deal with the crap that other people give them because they think they're in some way subservient to them.
Yeah, right. I was in a Ponderosa as a busboy, my first job ever, and I'll tell you what, I didn't want to be a busboy. But I know what's entailed. It made me appreciate the job. You know. And
Shit flying downhill.
That's what matters.
That was downhill. I was a busboy too.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. That was actually one of my favorite jobs, believe it or not.
I loved it too. But
I didn't love it. Woolworths. I loved Woolworths. That was fun.
Motivation. Consider it all motivation.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to have another chapter of this where we go into our favorite stories from when we were bus people.
I can tell you some doozies. Oh, God.
And the title of this is going to be Doozies from Our Childhood. Ron, obviously you can tell we had a ball with you. It was really wonderful. Thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Sure thing. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed the conversation greatly.
Me too. Dwight, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for being with us. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, so you can tell we're very passionate about this stuff too. Thank you all for joining. Take care and stay safe.
That was the HR Data Labs podcast. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you know anyone that might like to hear it, please send it their way. Thank you for joining us this week, and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.